Welcome to our Saturday simulcast, joined by Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart. I'm Alan Karpick. Want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel at Purdue. It's a Travel and Leisure's best hotel in Indiana nominee. Voting has been open for a while, but you can visit the Purdue Union Club Hotel and .com for more details and to show your Purdue pride by casting a vote for the Purdue Union Club Hotel. And I will say this about campus, at least over the last few weeks, things are looking a lot more normal. A lot of people out and about. That's a good sign, certainly, and certainly bodes well, hopefully, for a lot of activity this fall. Want to also remind folks that you can, that if you want to become a member of goldenblack.com, you can do so. Free trials are available. On our site, we have tags at the top of most of our stories of how you can get a free trial. So we'll start today on the Purdue's roster, the news of the week. And this wasn't necessarily all that shocking of news, Tom, but I'll start with you. You know, look at, to a layperson's look, boy, it looks like Purdue doesn't have any offensive linemen left. Just another two or three that are moving on or having to for medical reasons. And then, of course, also Austin Cormier, the punter, Austin Brooks Cormier, the punter, will be is gone as well. This is the new normal. Nobody likes that term, but the reality of how things are going to be here as these rosters really take on interesting shape as you head into a football season. Purdue maybe not too far outside the norm in terms of what's going on. What say you?
Yeah, everybody's into their own team, and whatever's happening there sometimes can get overstated, and some Purdue fans think the sky's falling with these players transferring out or hanging up their cleats, so to speak. But there's a lot of movement in a lot of these schools across the nation. I don't think Purdue's numbers are any more striking than anywhere else. I don't think any of the players who've left are going to leave any large voids. The only exception being Malik Carr. I think that was a bit of a jolt for him to go to Michigan State here. But again, long story short, I think Purdue's still okay. And Alan, you talked about some of the latest news. Yeah, and as you said, no real shock for when we got confirmation that Will Bramall and Kyle Jornigan were going to go on medical red shirts. We knew they had some issues with their back and didn't take part in spring practice. And I guess there's some finality to the process now as we speak. Jimmy McKenna is a player who graduated in May. He's another offensive lineman who's just decided to move on. I don't think he knew he probably didn't figure in the mix and just sort of wanted to get on with his life. And Brooks Cormier, like the two offensive linemen, Jornigan and Bramall, believe he's going to go on a medical red shirt as well. In some ways, guys, I'll be frank and honest with you. I think, who knows, it seemed like maybe the handwriting was on the wall for him too, as far as being a punter for Purdue this coming fall. All indications seem to be that Jack Ansell was going to be the guy who's going to be given every chance to win this job. Of course, Ansell is the 23-year-old Australian who's coming to campus this summer with his eyes on trying to win that job. So, yeah, the roster continues to shift, guys. Anybody who reads our site and reads Boiling Over knows Purdue's still active in the portal. I fully expect some more players to be added. We talked about the positions of need, offensive line, defensive line, running back, secondary being the primary ones as well. And also, guys, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next month maybe we see a handful of current Boilermakers hit the portal as well. So just stay buckled up. It's a long way to that season opener, September 4th, and this roster is very much far from a final finished product.
Brian, we've been recruiting since it seems like the beginning of time. This is just a whole new deal. I mean, in terms of the portal, we've talked about this a lot on this platform, but it is the way it's going to be in football and to some extent, certainly in basketball too, though the rosters are a lot smaller. Teams can change a great deal in the next month in terms of getting guys that to put square pegs into square holes, so to speak, will be an important thing for some of these coaches, not just Purdue, but everybody.
Yeah, it's. I mean, as we've said over and over again here, it's going to be more about year-to-year roster management, and whoever can help themselves on the fly the best are going to have significant advantages these days. Obviously, everybody's going to lose players to the portal. There's no way around that. Now, all of the guys we just talked about, those aren't all transfer situations. Obviously, the two offensive linemen have health situations, underscoring the real challenge in keeping young offensive linemen healthy. It always seems like a back injury early, a shoulder injury early, and those guys are cooked. It's just really a tough situation, really an unfortunate situation for some of those guys. But obviously, there's going to be transfers every year too, off sheer practicality, in terms of guys who want to play, guys who don't think there's a place for them at their current place. Hopefully, a lot of those guys can get degrees. That's what it all came for. Whether it's from what it's all about, whether it's at Purdue or whether it's wherever else. But you're going to see this every year. You're going to see 10 guys leave, 10 guys come in. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And it's going to come down to whoever can be the most effective recruiting the transfer portal, but also who can be the most effective at onboarding these guys when they get there right away. This is a really dicey game all these coaches are going to be playing, because you have to evaluate these guys, like that, in a lot of cases based off nothing, because chances are guys who are transferring, didn't play a whole lot wherever they're transferring from. And then you have to recruit them at the same time when everybody in college football and college basketball is falling all over themselves to recruit these guys. I've said this about in basketball for years, the graduate transfer wire. There is no more over-recruited individual in sports than the graduate transfer in basketball, because there's very little investment. It's a 1-year deal. If you have an open spot in your roster, sure, take him. It doesn't matter if he fits. It doesn't matter if he can't help you, for a lot of coaches anyway. You've made very little investment. But I think now the cluster that has become is now going to become recruiting in general, because every kid who transfers or puts his name in that database online is going to have 20 phone calls within an hour. And maybe 13 of those phone calls are actually interested. 7 other ones are just trying to figure out what's going on, trying to vet and whatnot. There's going to be offers before there's even been meaningful conversations. There's going to be offers made to players who have very little film. It is just going to be a really, really treacherous sort of landscape for people. It's going to be treacherous for the transfers too, because if you put your name out there and nobody wants you, you're stuck in the land of broken toys here, and it's not good. And the best outcome for everybody involved here is for everybody who transfers to find somewhere good, and that's not going to happen for everybody. There's going to be a lot of very positive stories that come from all this, and there's going to be a lot of behind the music type stories too. And it is just going to be a fascinating thing to watch in every aspect of the whole landscape.
I'll ask. Go ahead, Tom.
Kansas is putting together a staff right now, guys, and they hired Rob Ianello, and his title is general manager.
Yeah.
And again, to Brian's point, I mean, roster management.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure every Power 5 league is going to have a guy you think on the staff who's going to be like their GM,
right,
who's got his hands on high school kids and portal kids, among other things. So it's interesting how this continues to change, as Brian points out.
Well, hiring a general manager who's used to recruiting in the 80s and 90s is, perhaps a little bit, I don't know what all that job will entail in certain places. I don't know if that's the equivalent of the director of player personnel job that most schools have, but this is a whole different deal. I mean, this is profoundly different from, the traditional recruiting model, the high school recruiting model, the junior college recruiting model. I don't know what's going to happen to the JUCOs. I think I don't know what's going to happen to those guys, because a lot of people don't want them anyway. And now it's like, why would you go recruit somebody who's in junior college for a reason when you can go recruit somebody who you already know was academically admitted to Vanderbilt or Purdue or, somewhere like that. It's just, you better be really good in junior college, and you better have all all your business in order if people are still going to, be looking to you first.
Yeah, it's going to be a storyline that will be ever changing, and will change the face even of how we do stuff too as well, I think. All right, on to the second topic of the Saturday simulcast, schedules, and obviously maybe about 10 days ago we'll start with basketball only because it's just kind of interesting conversation for a May in terms of what the men's basketball Big Ten schedule, not the specific dates, but the teams you're going to play twice. You being Purdue, and the ones that you're going to have your single plays. I know you pointed out, Brian, if you believe it at how some of these teams are forecasted, the ESPN's are way too early, top 25, Ohio State's ranked 4th. Purdue only plays them once. Maryland, who's going to be ranked 10th, Purdue plays them once, both those games at home. They will play Michigan twice. They will play Indiana twice and some others, but anything that jumped out at you with respect to that schedule, and again, kind of early, but it is something that kind of gives us something to talk about this time of year.
Yeah, one other thought just popped into my head about what I just said about football recruiting the JUCOs. One reasonable scenario is the Power 5 doesn't recruit JUCOs anymore. They all go to Marshall, and all of a sudden Marshall is the junior college All-America team, and that's true. That's very possible. That has nothing to do with the basketball schedule, obviously, so I'll get back on topic here.
Please.
I think the single plays, when I first saw it, I looked at it like win total mattered more than anything else, and getting Nebraska, which would be 2 wins, getting Minnesota, which would be 2 wins, and getting Penn State, all due respect to Micah Shrewsbury, would likely be 2 wins, is a detriment. But then when you just look at it from the, who the other,
because they're single plays. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
because they're single plays, that would be at least 5 wins out of those 6 games, if not 6 wins out of 6 games. But then when you look at it the other way, in terms of how Purdue, how this could factor into the Big Ten championship race, and I should preface this by saying Purdue should be afraid of no one next year, because they're clearly one of the best teams in the Big Ten. They're clearly probably one of the best teams in the country. People think Maryland's going to be really good. We'll see. They're very transfer dependent here. They've added a couple of really potentially influential guys.
Yeah,
getting them once and at home, and bear in mind, home will be home again next year, presumably, as fans come back. Presumably, obviously, we can't say anything for certain even yet. But I think that's a fair assumption to make. Getting Ohio State at home just that one time is a big deal. Those are 2 top 10 teams that you have an advantage over because you have them at home. And then Michigan State, them being the one you play on the road, they should be good, but they're also going to be prohibitively young, I would have to think. Getting them on the road, if you had to get one of those 3 schools on the road, I would say it would be Michigan State, just because I think they might be the most vulnerable just because of their presumed youth next season. So those are 3 presumed contenders that you only get once each. So I think that there's real advantage, in a Big Ten title race context, but there's disadvantage in a win total context. And the first matters more than the latter, because when you play better teams, that helps your NCAA tournament resume too. Wait a minute. I think I just didn't think that through.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
I think it's a wash from an NCAA tournament resume perspective, because, that second game against Nebraska, wouldn't help your resume, but a second game against Ohio State would really help your resume. So I think the NCAA tournament part of it's a wash. The Big Ten title part of it is an advantage for Purdue. The win total part of it, I think, is a disadvantage for Purdue.
It's way too early to be, but it is kind of an interesting thing. Obviously, Indiana is locked in as a home and home. Iowa, Michigan, who will be a very good team again, figures to be in the top 12 or top 15 teams in the country. The Boilermakers the Wolverines will come to Mackey, and the Boilermakers will head up to Ann Arbor at some point. Tom, we've handicapped, and again, scheduling is always an interesting thing to talk about.
I've laid my odds, which mean nothing. I understand that, though it's kind of fun to look at Purdue's football schedule, that is, and say, all right, how many games is Purdue going to – if Vegas were picking them all now, which they're not, it's not yet, at least I don't think so, what games will Purdue be favored in? I look at Oregon State, the season opener, maybe a 3-point favorite. This is me. UConn, maybe a little over touchdown favorite. Illinois and Minnesota, home games at the end of the month, end of the first month, I should say, September 25th, and I think the first week of October. Purdue would be a slight favorite in those games. And maybe the only other game, it might be Michigan State at home, November the 6th. It's a daunting schedule in a season that Jeff Brom and company would really like to get things righted. It seems on paper that if Purdue's going to get to that 7 or 8 win total and get back to or even to 6 to get back to the bowl situation, it's going to have to pull an upset or two. How do you view that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Alan. Favored maybe in 5 games. You can maybe make a case for 6 if you wanted to maybe stretch it with the IU game at home, but we all know IU's trending up, and that's a long way away. But I'll go with you and say 5 right now. Looks like it probably would be favored in. And I've said it before. I've written it, fellas. It's no great revelation to say that a fast start is mandatory here. Every team wants a fast start. I get that. But, slow starts out of the gate have unfortunately been sort of trademarks and something Jeff Brom's had to deal with here during his Purdue tenure. Just hadn't had a lot of luck starting fast. And boy, it's really imperative this year, Alan and Brian, when you look at the toughness of the schedule that you alluded to, you got to take care of business against a still developing Oregon State team at home. You've got to win at Connecticut, guys. Randy Etzel's team didn't even play last year. They set up the entire season. It's been an abysmal program for 5, 6, 7, 8 years now. Notre Dame, that is what it is. Nobody expects to win there. Maybe the Boilers can capture some of that Spoilermaker magic. But again, then you got the two Big Ten games to open the season, right, at home. Illinois and Minnesota. Those are peer programs for Purdue. Division programs, those are programs Purdue has to crawl over if it wants to move up that pecking order in the West Division. And Brom's had great success against Illinois, not such good success against Minnesota. But again, 4-1 would be fantastic. If that happens, I think Purdue gets to a bowl with some relative ease, with 6 or 7 wins. 3-2, I think it's a little dicier proposition. Anything less than 3 wins in those first 5, though, guys, and boy, it's going to be awfully challenging. So again, it all begins September 4th at home against Oregon State. And guys, who knows, maybe that day, Ross-Ade Stadium will be packed with maskless fans and all the Boilermaker fans sitting shoulder to shoulder that day. Who knows?
Yeah, Brian, obviously last year with Brian Brom, with Jeff Brom out with COVID, Purdue does beat Iowa and does get off to a 2-0 start. But you're right, it's been a challenge for this program in Jeff Brom's other 3 seasons to get off the deck the way you want to, and yet it's hard to minimize the importance of taking a step in the right direction this year for Jeff Brom and company.
Yeah, this is a different year because Purdue's got to get some momentum back. They need some positive stuff to happen to get people feeling good about the program, not just fans, recruits, the players themselves. They need to know something good can happen after the last 2 seasons have been so difficult. And I think from a fan's perspective, and that's only a small part of the whole overall equation, but
yeah,
I think there's going to be so much excitement just to be there that I think that sort of excitement, enthusiasm can get weaponized against you if things don't go well right out of the gate. I think that sort of energy can turn bad real quick if you can't take care of business against an Oregon State, and especially if you go out to UConn and can't get it done there. You look at what kind of negative tipping point that Nevada game was last year. That's a game, Purdue on paper should have won, Purdue on the field should have won, and that just feels like the delineation moment between all the positive stuff that happened those first 2 years and everything that's happened ever since. And I think that it's hard to say Purdue has to get off to a fast start because that Iowa win last year was great. And obviously when all was said and done, it seemed like a million years ago. But I think that, Purdue just needs some wind behind its sails here. And I think that Oregon State game and UConn game are probably the season. And, us sitting here talking about the big picture of, them going to a bowl game and or whatever is good for May. But I think those two games are the season because they're two teams you should beat probably. And if you don't, things get a little bit sketchy.
Yeah, I think too, Tom, and there's a lot of talk, obviously, and things written about also how much emphasis you put on a COVID year. I mean, it's just so hard to compare apples to apples. You can't throw it out completely, but maybe that is an advantage for Jeff Brom and company. The fact that maybe last year is really just a wash because of what all went on. And we don't even know what all went on in terms of trying to get these rosters on the field and play. It's all an interesting situation just because of what went on in 2020.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The challenges were many for these teams across the country last year. We all know that, navigating the testing, losing players to COVID. Purdue's staff obviously was impacted greatly by COVID as well. You talked about Jeff Brom missing that opener against Iowa, and I'm sure they'll all be happy to have this sense of normalcy back here. So we'll see, guys. We talked about the front half of that schedule and the opportunity that lurks there. And again, I think the back half of the schedule, there's potential. And Brian talked about momentum. If they get off to a good start, guys, it's not crazy to think Purdue can win, or they can win at Nebraska. I mean, that's a program a lot like Purdue. They're looking for a breakthrough this year under Scott Frost. Purdue and Jeff Brom have had success in Lincoln before. Those are two pretty evenly stacked programs. Michigan State at home, I think you got to beat the Spartans. Mel Tucker is still very much in transition. East Lansing as well. And, Northwestern Wrigley Field. I mean, I know Fitzgerald has typically come out on top, but those games are always tight, it seems like. And there's not much difference between Purdue and Northwestern. And Northwestern keeps things buttoned up. They don't beat themselves. They do everything right, have their I's dotted and T's crossed. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that's a winnable game too. So there's still opportunity in the back half of that schedule, but you like to navigate and travel that back half of the schedule with some momentum and confidence that will be fueled by a nice start.
Yeah, no question. All right, Brian, I want to move on to another thing that we haven't talked about, at least in this platform, is the two new assistant coaches, kind of new. Paul Lusk, not a new coach by any stretch, but Terry Johnson joins Matt Painter's staff. Here you have a coach in Matt Painter that's a relatively young veteran, so to speak, but brings in two guys that are very much known quantities. You've written about that, but just your initial reactions about how they will blend in and what there's always transition, and then you also replacing a couple GAs as well. This is something that Matt Painter is probably pretty good at, but it's going to have a little different look in terms of having these guys around.
Yeah, I think that, Purdue has gotten to the point where I think they have pretty considerable organizational strength. I think Painter knows what he wants. Painter is more comfortable in what he wants and what he does more so than he ever has been before. And I think the faces around him can change, quite a bit, but I don't think it really changes a whole lot. Now, the familiarity with Paul Lusk is obviously something that should make for very, very little transition for him. Now, defense has changed at Purdue. A lot of things have changed at Purdue, but basketball hasn't changed. And I think the fact that he knows Painter so well, Painter knows him so well, he hits the ground running. I think he's probably a better coach in some ways than he was when he left Purdue originally, because typically people get better at things the more they do them and the more they age and mature. I think Terry Johnson is obviously an outsider to Purdue's program, but he's also a guy who's sort of like a central casting type of guy for Purdue. There've been common denominators for the most part among the people that Painter's always brought in to his program, and one of them is good people who kind of keep their head down and do their job. Good people skills, people who get along well with the players, things like that. Terry Johnson's that kind of guy by every account. And I think that he knows of Purdue well. I think Purdue and Butler have had quite a few, I guess, distant associations over the years. They're very like-minded programs who've been sort of built the same way, on the same principles and whatnot. And I think Terry Johnson should fit in really well. The adjustment there being the fact that he's going to move to offense, as opposed to, previously he's been mostly involved with defense. But, he comes from the Butler tree that birthed a lot of what Purdue has done offensively here the last couple of years in terms of their sets and whatnot. And I wouldn't anticipate that being too big a deal. Painter will obviously have much more of a hand in the offense this year, I would think, until Terry Johnson can get his legs under him in terms of knowing everything Purdue does, knowing Purdue's personnel and whatnot. But I wouldn't anticipate there being really any sort of net loss here for Purdue in terms of, when you replace 2/3 of your full-time staff, there's almost always going to be an adjustment. But I think that the people involved here will make for less of an adjustment than ever before. And I think Painter's situation at Purdue offsets a lot of the traditional adjustment that would take place anyway. I just think this will be relatively painless.
Painless, seamless, all those words that may describe that. And if you've been around as long as Matt Painter has, he's kind of come to expect that out of him and what he brings to the table. Tom, we've talked about Jeff Brom's switches on the defensive side of the ball. Still hard for us to know exactly what that's going to be like. I know that we know what Mark Hagan's about, and we certainly it seems to be that it's a very positive move on the defensive side of the football. Obviously, a complete move, complete change. But again, that's part of that integration process, and these guys will be reporting that not the coaches have been here for quite a while, but players will be coming to campus in June. It's all part of what you want to try to build towards a successful 2021 season.
Yeah, I think it's no overstatement to say that the defensive staff, they've got to click, and every member of that staff is new this year, very unique. New defensive line coach, new linebackers coach, new cornerbacks coach, new safeties coach, front to back, all new. These guys have to mesh quickly. A nice mix of especially veteran voices back there. Purdue's bringing in, of course, one youngster, James Adams from Navy. He's going to work in the secondary. We think he's going to be the cornerbacks coach. But yeah, I mean, that's I think, guys, is the side of the ball that's going to really tell the tale of this 2021 season for Purdue. I think the offense, when it's all said and done, will carry its weight and be productive. I like the potential. I think the line will be improved, and the skill position talent speaks for itself. But can the defense get better, getting off the field on third downs? Can the defense generate more pressure, guys? They were last in the Big Ten in sacks last year. They need more heat. Can they generate more turnovers? Honestly, after Jeff Blom's debut season, they've really struggled. I think they've had a negative turnover margin each of the last 3 years. So the hope is, guys, you've read it, talked to the coaches too. They want to be more aggressive. That's been the operative word all spring. Aggressive, aggressive, aggressive. Yes, they know with that aggression comes the likelihood they're going to give up big plays, but they're willing to make that sacrifice and hope that by being aggressive, they make more than their share of big plays defensively to give that offense short fields, maybe to score some defensive touchdowns, and just to plain get off the field. They can't be bend but don't break. We saw how that worked last year. So, again, so much new on that side of the ball. And like I said, the potential's there. And again, it starts with the staff that, again, brings a lot of experience. Mark Hagan, Brad Lambert, and Ron English in particular, guys. Lambert and English being former head coaches. Mark Hagan's been around the block. He's been at West Lafayette, Austin, Texas, College Station, Bloomington. Again, you have to feel good about the makeup of that staff and the potential there on defense.
Yeah, no question on that front, and that is going to be a storyline for this year. All right, Friday was Gene Katie's 85th birthday. we all have had been around him. Brian's been around him for a long time. He's a rock star at 85, but that's a good thing. It still has an impact on this program, though, what he brings to the table. And he still kind of has a national aura around him, Brian. And it's good to be 85 and still playing golf like Gene has been doing. He's a guy that, from an impact standpoint, still has a hand or a finger on the program, certainly in terms of a relationship with Matt Painter and company.
Yeah. I know they speak regularly. I know Matt Painter values his presence, values his input, values being his friend, values just chatting with him, things like that. I think the players like him. I think it's cool that he spends as much time around Purdue as he does when there's not a pandemic. But I think that, his fingerprints are still all over this. This is still, a lot of people over there would tell you, this is still Gene Katie's program. His signature's on the court's named for him. People love him. A lot of the principles that he instilled at Purdue were some of the principles Matt Painter rebuilt this program on and has kind of modernized over the years. And I know that Matt Painter really wants to go to the Final Four for Matt Painter, but I think Matt Painter really wants to go to the Final Four for Gene Katie too. Would exercise some of his demons to a certain extent. But as I said, Gene Katie's fingerprints are still all over that program, and I know he takes a great deal of pride in it, and I know Purdue takes a great deal of pride in being associated with him. I'd like to see him make the Hall of Fame one day.
Yeah, he's, it's funny, and he's the guy that we do hear from time to time, and he's very interested in coming back for football this year. Tom, he's a football guy. That's part of what Gene Katie is, and that's part of what makes him such a still an icon, not only at Purdue sports but everywhere you look.
Yeah, I still remember when he was hired, and I think about March or April of 1980.
Yeah,
I heard stories from some people. I think he lived with John DeCamp, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
I think right when he got to town. And I got to see those early years close up, first in high school, then in college. I remember watching Duke and Mike Krzyzewski come in the very first year for an NIT game. And on it's gone, guys. And what a career, 25 years. And we all, suffered some heartbreak. I know I did over the years watching the March Madness games. And I went to Lexington and Knoxville in 94, and I had buddies in Indianapolis in 1990, but sometimes we focus on that too much. The Big Ten championships were remarkable, guys. The unexpected success that he delivered, 1983-84, was a lot of fun. And the three-peat, I tell you what, I know Robinson's team expected to win that year in 1994, but the next two teams that won back-to-back Big Ten titles, you saw that. The number one seed, I think he was the number one seed, guys, 3 times. Awfully impressive, too. The players, the talent, the coaches, the coaching tree with Bruce Weber, Kevin Stallings, Steve Lavin. So, again, like Brian said, his footprint, his fingerprints remain all over this program. And it's cool, Alan, like you said, that he still has that rock star aura about him. I think he gets a kick out of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
He loves coming to games. I think he likes the attention, and why not? 85 years old. I hope to see 85, and Katie's blessed to have seen 85 and seen it as a healthy man too.
Yeah, still playing golf and all that good stuff. So, all right, guys, we will put a wrap on today's Saturday simulcast, and appreciate your time, and want to thank the Union, the Purdue Union Club Hotel, and as a sponsor of this simulcast. And we wish all of you a good rest of the weekend, and we'll be back next week with more from our Saturday simulcast. Have a great week, everybody.